You've came from the US and you've lived most of your life in Europe. What about chamber music? You are a great musician, also playing chamber music. What about that as also an option for professional musicians? I know that it's we have more concerts in the US as in Europe. I'm not taking coronavirus as a part of the equation right now.
Yeah.
But here in Brazil, unfortunately, this is not an usual thing for professional musicians.
Yeah.
Why do you think that, and what do you think we can do to develop this area here in the country?
No, I think that chamber music is absolutely essential for every musician. You know, I mean, I'll say that outright. Again, out front, I was very blessed at the Curtis Institute because my chamber music coaches were Felix Galamir, who premiered Berg's Lyric Quartet, and later helped form the Marlborough Festival with Sirkin. I knew Herzowski would play chamber music for Mrs. Schneider, who was the cellist of the legendary Budapest Quartet. I played everything. There's not a, forget Beethoven, Schubert, Mozart, I played everything. Played all 31 Haydn trios, I mean, everything. But then we also played Reger, we played Fitzler, we did Dochnani, we played the Bloch Piano Quintet, one of the great works of the 20th century in Carnegie Hall. I mean, all of this, for anyone involved, is essential. You know, I think it should be mandatory. You know, that's something, for instance, I would gladly participate in something of that type of, that direction, whatever ensemble, because it forces you to listen to what your partners are doing and to respond immediately, you know, to whatever. If someone begins a phrase this way, you know, you can try to get a uniform bowing or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. It should be a dialogue. I mean, a Haydn quartet, which every musician should know, is a dialogue. It was listened to during Haydn's age rhetorically. It was like a conversation. And that was then, you know, Mozart and Beethoven obviously continued, but a Haydn quartet is a conversation among four musicians, four players. So you respond immediately to that. You get to know how to respond to people. And what is it? What's that? What's the difference between that and what a conductor's doing, for instance, or sitting in the orchestra in a wind section, and you respond immediately to the intonation of the person next to you or whatever. If you don't have that, you're playing in a damn vacuum. Sorry, you know. As a matter of fact, my first kind of epiphany that I might be a conductor is funny, because I just coached the work when I was with you, the Brahms.
Yeah.
And it was at Curtis, and one of Ballet's students brought the Brahms quintet in for me with the strings. I mean, the quintet, not just the piano part. And all of a sudden, I noticed I kind of was like someone, you know, like a marionette, you know. I got up and I was, no, here, you have to hit more of the cello here, you have to hear more of this. And I thought, and by memory, I didn't even know I knew the piece by memory back then, but I have this weird memory. Anyway, it plays tricks on me. But then I was, you know, I was in there and I was, no, they said, you have to be. And I remember even my girlfriend, because word spread around Curtis immediately, and I got home then, I was with the girl, and she said, who are you to start conducting? You know, I said, well, I wasn't conducting, I was, you know, but it's the Brahms quintet is a symphony. I mean, it's a symphony. It's the same proportions as a symphony and as great a work. And, you know, it's what a conductor does, controlling that. And so on every level, or I would tell the municipal back then, I remember one rehearsal. I was doing the Beethoven Missa Solemnis.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in the credo, and again, the Ed Ascendit. And I was telling him to play with Les Bow. And I said something like, you have to play this like the coda of the Opus 95 quartet. And they looked at me and like to say, well, we don't speak Chinese. and I said, well, you all know that Opus 95, the coda of the Serioso quartet. No. So, what are you playing? You know the Razumovsky quartet? No. You know the Lake quartet. So I started making recordings at home, copies of recordings for the players in my orchestra to listen to Beethoven quartets. You know, if they had known that as a reference, they would have known exactly, you know, immediately how to play those figurations in the violins in that passage in the Mass. But they didn't. And so you're sitting in an orchestra, which is basically a big chamber group. What is an orchestra? You're listening. You can't just be that you're looking at the idiot in front doing this, because, you know, that's not what playing in an orchestra is, like, oh, the maestro, this and that. No. And some people in my profession are idiots and don't know the score. I mean, let's face it. You know, they're just putting on a show, or they practice in the mirror, but they don't know the score. So you have to rely on each other. There are stories about the Boston Symphony, the first years of Kusevitsky, who was a great musician, and he was a double bass virtuoso, and he was, you know, he had a real vision. You hear the recordings today, I mean, they're incredible, some of the music making. But he was not a great conductor and could not play the piano at all, could not learn scores. So he would prepare his scores by having his assistants play the scores for him on the piano, and he would conduct, you know, but he couldn't really impart to the orchestra he didn't have the baton technique of someone like Pierre Monteux had before him with that orchestra or whatever. So the musicians were forced to listen to each other even more, and many said because of that they became like the greatest orchestra of the time, or one of the few, you know, back in the days when there were 4 or 5 great orchestras in the United States. Now there's 20. You can't tell the difference between San Francisco and New York or whatever. They're all great. But back then there were the top 5. But I mean, Boston immediately became a great orchestra because they were listening to each other so much because the conductor wasn't clear, you know. But that's chamber music. Not to mention the richness of the repertoire.
Yeah.
I mean, the strings, you have, you know, some of the greatest music ever written. And even for the winds, you have, I mean, how many, you know, things like the Mozart Grand Partite and so many other things, and so many 20th century works. You have the intimate Konzertmusik, you know, which smaller groups. I had talked to you once about the possibility of doing all 7, you know, breaking off into little groups and having each group doing one of those. I mean, there are so many thousands and thousands and thousands of works, and Baroque as well. I mean, you can consider almost the entire Baroque as chamber music. A Bach cantate is chamber music, is a chamber work. Wasn't played, you know, by 40 people. It was played by maybe 10 musicians in the chorus of the most 16, maybe even 4 at some performances. So I mean, that's also was chamber music. So all the Handel, Concerti Grossi. So I mean, if you're not involved with this repertoire and you're just dreaming about playing the Dvorak New World for the zillionth time, or playing the Alpine Symphony because you want to play the horn part or something, or you know, you horn player. Okay, that's nice to play that, but it's also important to play in a Mozart serenade, where the horn's more exposed, you know, or the quintet with piano. So I'm, as you can tell, a very strong and passionate advocate for chamber music being required, and I mean seriously required, you know, and worked upon. So because everyone's better prepared, and just in terms of practicality, you have perhaps a better chance, especially now, of getting some
of a
work.
professional life.
Listen to me, young people. You know, even so, maybe people will be more inclined to engage a group of 6 than they will of 40. You don't have the problem of fitting on the stage. You can get a group of 8 string players and do the Enesco octet, one of the great masterpieces, or the Mendelssohn octet, both composed by genius teenagers. You know, you can do all kinds of things, wind things. We're thinking about all kinds of stuff in Rio as well along those lines. But you know, I think you have really better chances in the post-COVID era, which is going to go on for a while. I think it's going to be a while before we get back to doing, you know, Heldenleben again, or things with big chorus or whatever.
100 musicians on stage is probably far away.
I won't say ever, but it's going to be a long time before the conditions present themselves to do that, and before people are ready to do that, because people will be afraid of infections and all that. So I think practically, and think in terms of your own enrichment, you know, and learn string players, you know, all the quartets of Haydn, from Opus, you know, 17, from Opus 917 through 103, you know, and the unbelievable riches there, and Mozart and Beethoven and whatever, Bartok.
And sometimes instrumentalists, they don't realize how challenged the voices of a string quartet are.
Hey.
And it will challenge them as virtuosos much more than a concert, a violin concert, for instance.
I agree.
Yes. And this is amazing, because they are doing music together, but it's challenging them, and they are learning perhaps much more than they are learning playing in a concerto.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And, if you think playing the Wieniawski or whoever is difficult for first violin, try some of the first violin parts of the Haydn quartets.
Yeah, that's it.
Meu Deus, I mean, you know, Pesadelo, mesmo. You know, try that, and match that in with the other 4 and the intonation. And I mean, there are certain passages in Haydn which are horrendously difficult. So I mean, I agree. You know, you should get out of this thinking of, you know, my life about a musician. I'm going to give another chat later today and say the same things. My life is like this. That's all I have. Either I'm going to be the next Heifetz, or I'm going to be the next concertmaster, or I'm going to be the next Piatigorsky, or be the, you know, lead cello or whatever in an orchestra, and that's all I think about. No, you have to open. Get a group together and prepare. If you want to kill your orchestra, or if Claudio wants to kill the orchestra, take turns killing the orchestra, schedule the Schoenberg Chamber Symphony, Opus 9.
Yeah.
Try playing those individual parts, and then trying putting them together. And boa sorte. You know? But I mean, coming out of an experience like, or the Berg Chamber Concerto, which I don't like the piece. I don't like the piece so much acoustically, orally, but I mean, my God, you know, those things are so much more difficult than anything you'll play. You know, there's a lot of things that you can do there. You know, also with your youth orchestra, you can break off into small groups, even in one single concert, and have one group do the Schoenberg Chamber Symphony, have another group you can do here we go again, how we always are. You can have a concert of chamber symphonies. You know, you can have one group do the Schoenberg, do another group do the Schrecker, another one do the Berg, or do a Bloch Concerti Grossi, whatever, you know, and break into groups. So I think
and
that's
give all of them the opportunity to
everyone, you know, different groups
play a main role.
Yeah, instead of one big group, have 3 different groups, and you can bring a singer to do Britain Illumination or the Serenade or a Bach cantate or do a version for string orchestra of the Schoenberg second string quartet. I told a couple of sopranos recently they should start learning that, the soprano part for that. You know, there are many things that one could do, and I think that's the way we have to be thinking now. Not, oh, I have to get back and play, you know, my big solo in Mahler. I think Mahler you can forget for a while. And you want to know something? Good. Because Mahler's been played to death. I mean, I love Mahler. I mean, I knew all of Mahler symphonies when I was a kid and all the scores. But, you know, every cat and dog now plays a Mahler symphony. It's time to also rethink things, you know, when you go back to these works, they'll be fresher. I mean, I've had so many Mahler phases and Bruckner phases and Wagner and other phases. You know, you immerse yourself completely in a composer, and then you can't stand it for a while, and then you go back years later and you go, oh, it's much fresher now. So I'm discovering things now in Beethoven work that I couldn't listen to a few years because I heard them and played them so often I was, you know, sick. But then you take a break. So I think it's a good time now to put Mahler on ice, you know, and all these big things and these deslumbrado things that people want to show, and rethink that also, you know, for the day we all hopefully go back. Yeah.
One of the most amazing things for me when we chat is your capacity to think of repertoire in a very creative way, not to show how much or how many pieces you know by heart, or is by putting the pieces together to organize an experience for the public. So they would learn something out of it. They will get through some ideas, and then it will develop new ways of thinking after the concert. And specifically talking about the concert you did with the youth orchestra, well, as you've mentioned, it was very special, but at the end it was also an experience for everybody, because the way the pieces were connected. Could you tell us a little bit about that repertoire, and also the way you think about how to connect pieces to organize a program?
Well, I mean, I love planning seasons, as you know. I do it for fun. You know, it's a little eccentric maybe, but you have to first know what your conditions will be, how many players, all of that, what the rest of the season looks like, when the orchestra or the opera has done it or work, all of those things. But I try to put together programs that fulfill certain needs. I like to put at least one thing that's unusual on each program. You know, as you know, I sent you about 100 programs for the for that concert. I even had to write you after a while, Paulo. Please, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just you know, but I think certain criterion should be fulfilled. Something that will attract the audience. You know, some big work that's easily listenable or easily recognizable, but then also something that's not as well known. So, and then also, do you want to have a soloist? Do you want to have this? And which epic? You know, I don't want to have a program of a Handel Concerto Grosso followed by a piece by Luigi Nono, followed by Dvorak Eighth Symphony. You know, that's ridiculous. There has to be an idea, like just spontaneously now. If we did a Handel Concerto Grosso, then I would repeat the Schoenberg Concerto for String Quartet and Orchestra, which I did at the Municipal, which is based on a Handel Concerto Grosso, and do an original Handel. I mean, I'm already thinking, you know,
how it would sound and the contrast, and
have Handel Concerto Grosso, and then Schoenberg's Concerto for String Quartet and Orchestra, which is his reworking or his improving, he thought, of a Handel Concerto Grosso. And then the second half, okay, well, we're with Handel. Who's Handel's greatest contemporary, or one of them? You can argue Hameau as well, but Scarlatti. But well, how about Bach? You know, so let's do Bach. Let's do maybe a Bach suite. Since we're going original transcription, why don't we do the second half also original, something a Bach, a suite or something, and do the Schoenberg orchestra. Yeah, and do the Schoenberg orchestration of the Saint Anne Prelude and Fugue. So you have Handel and Bach originals, and then Handel Schoenberg and Bach Schoenberg. It's a beautiful program. So we just made one, and that's how I think. That's how I think with orchestra concerts and with opera planning and with piano recitals. I mean, I'd never played a piano recital in my life where I didn't include at least one work I'd never played before, or something unusual. So I mean, yeah, we just had online an example of how I think. You know,
I love the answer.
So like with the program we had, okay, well, we decided on Heldenleben. We had discussed many other things. Okay, well, I have an orchestra with 8 horns and a large complement of woodwinds, quadruple woodwinds. What would go well with that? And we want to do something with a soloist. So how about a Mahler song cycle, because Mahler and Strauss are obviously contemporaries, you know. And okay, so we decide on that. And what would go with that? Well, what about the Wozzeck excerpts? Because we have the orchestra for that, and we have the same singer. And Berg obviously was influenced by both Strauss and Mahler. I mean, Mahler was his idol, but Berg was, of course, heavily influenced, as every composer was at the time, by Strauss as well, especially Salome and Elektra. But yeah, so then you have a program basically of 3 contemporaries. They all knew each other or had met, you know, at least. Berg knew Strauss and Mahler personally. So we have a beautiful program of early 20th century, well, Wozzeck's a little later, but not quite turn of the century, but, you know, first quarter of the 20th century, contemporaries, and all these influences. And there were certainly influences from Mahler's orchestration of his leader in the way Berg orchestrated, because Berg never used the full orchestra, with few exceptions, the interlude that we played. But in general, it's like a huge chamber orchestra.
It's like a chamber orchestra. Yes.
Yeah, it's more like the Mahler leader, in fact, than the Mahler symphonies. His orchestration is much more like the Mahler, the pointillistic. So yeah, okay, but in order to do that, you have to know these things. So again, you have to, you know, make the effort or be curious, because I couldn't do those things without knowing these pieces or knowing the instrumentation, you know, off the top of my head of Wozzeck and Heldenleben. Go, oh yeah, we're doing Wozzeck, we can do Heldenleben. If we only have 6 horns, we can't do Heldenleben because it has 8. So we have to do a Philharmonspiegel or something. But, you know, if we have 8 horns, we can do, you know, that's how you think. And if we only have 2 horns, well, we can think about
a different piece. You know. Yeah, okay.
So that's how I work. If you have 4 horns but few strings, you say, okay, well, we do Haydn Symphony number 31. It's the most difficult thing the horns will ever play. I would suggest to your young horn players, if they want a difficult work to play, yeah, forget Mahler and forget Heldenleben and Strauss and all of that, and sit yourselves down and try to play the Haydn Horn Signal Symphony number 31 cleanly and accurately and po sorci. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be 20th century.
Yeah,
you know, there are a lot of things. So I think this also goes back to what we're talking about the general culture and knowledge, and you know, that's what I've written a couple of texts on my Facebook page, basically along those lines, hoping that especially younger people, you know, will take this time and not think, oh, I can't play my symphony or whatever, and use this time to go a little bit into these things we're talking about, you know, enrich your knowledge of repertoire, broaden your horizons, that, music's not just playing your instrument and not just playing your instrument in a limited amount of repertoire. If you're playing a Schubert quartet, listen to Schubert Lieder as well. Don't think, oh, that's for singers. No. And the singer should do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Life is not just singing Puccini arias and putting on, or whatever. No. They will be enriched the same way. Mm-hmm. If they know more than just their little world of opera or concert, So that's how I plan, and that's how I run institutions as well when I have been in front of them. Yeah.